Welcome to the Leader Impact Podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities around the world, dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make the show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social at LeaderImpact. If you're listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Elvis Filote. Elvis is a market engagement lead at McDonald's, engaging with markets in Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, and North America on data analytics and governance strategies. He promotes and implements global data best practices, resources, and tools. Elvis is also a consultant, trainer, and executive coach and helps team leaders and executives explore motivating solutions to accelerate their performance and achieve better results. He is dedicated to building communities of influential leaders who serve as change agents for positive impact and mentors for emerging leaders. He is also leading LeaderImpact Global, our strategy and development team. Welcome, Elvis.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Well, in case, our listeners don't know this, but you are currently in Bucharest, Romania. We are on a bit of a time difference, so I have sucked back enough coffees to get me going because it is early here. How do you do it? It's 7 a.m. for me, and I'm a 5 a.m. club. But how do you, just my first question, how do you work across all the time zones? I'm reading this, I'm like, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, and North America. So we're talking hours. Do you work all the time?
Yeah. Well, I do work a lot of hours, that's for sure. Hardest is probably connecting with China, Japan, Australia, because it's often it has to be around 1:32 a.m. my time. But it's not that often, so not a huge problem. I gotten I've gotten used to it, and I try to balance. Whenever I have things happening late in the evening, try to get a slower morning and so on.
Yeah. One of our Leader Impact books right now is about boundaries and working hours. So it's very, I can understand people who work globally and who, yes, you have a meeting at 1:30, you'll take the next morning, or,
Yeah.
you have to make it work for you. So thanks for entertaining me on that question. I am excited to talk to you. We, in regards to leadership in your country and dealing globally, because you deal with so many more people. My world is, and many people's world is our own country, our own people right down the block. So I'm excited for you to share a little bit more. The first question we want to talk about is leadership style and approach. And the question is, what makes a great leader in your country? And do you feel this is unique to your country?
Well, let me share a little bit of background about my country and Eastern Europe. I think it applies to Eastern Europe as well. So, coming from communism, obviously leadership was very top down and very hierarchical. We've had our share of dictators, and in Romania we have a not so positive figure that has influenced our culture and kind of our perception of leadership. So I think right now, about 30 some years after our revolution, people are looking for a different style of leadership. So they appreciate something that's different from what communism kind of presented. So I think some leadership traits that are very appreciated are, first of all, a leader who models what he's expecting others to do. And it's always great to see a leader that is not asking and has high standards, but when he models them, when he embodies some of the values, and it's something around integrity, isn't it? Whenever we're modeling what we're expecting others to do, so that's one thing. Probably another one would be a leader that's vulnerable. It's modest. I think there's a saying in Romania, and kind of teaching. We've grown with it. You got to be good at everything. You got to do everything well. but that's often a recipe for mediocrity. But as I train leaders, as I coach executive leaders, they often say, "Ah, my mindset was always I had to be the best at everything. It does not matter sales, marketing. I had to be the smartest person in the room." It's not true. We cannot be that. And I think a leader who knows what he's good at is very aware of his strengths and weaknesses and focus on where his strengths are and surrounds himself with the kind of people that are smarter and better than him, and knows how to leverage those skills. I think that's going to be very important. So those are two traits that I would say are very important in our culture right now. Yeah, we appreciate a leader that models and embodies the values, and is a person of integrity, and then a leader who really um, knows his strengths, weaknesses, and his success is not his success, is the success of the team. That takes a little bit of modesty.
Yeah. Would you say there's any difference between men and women? Because when you said about you got to be good at everything, perfection is a I think we deal with that all the like I'm still dealing with that, thinking I need to be
Yeah,
perfect. Um,
yeah.
and I don't know if it's any different because you just said about for the last 30 years, it's taken a long time for women to step up to the plate.
It's very true. It's very true,
Yeah,
and I think it's true in our culture. Um, Traditionally, men had more leadership positions, and now if things are changing. We're seeing more women take leadership positions, which is great and encouraged. It should be. Um, I think there is a not an easy transition to kind of be in that role and be successful in their role. And I think it's tougher. It's more difficult for women because they're also handling other challenges and needs at home, providing and taking care of the kids, family. Not that the husband doesn't have any of those responsibilities, but you understand what I'm saying. Um, so I think it's true for women. It applies to everything. I think thankfully we're in a much better place than where we used to be culturally, transitioning from communism to where we are right now. And again, thankfully, we're seeing a lot more women in leadership positions, which is great.
yeah. And when you deal with, uh, you're dealing with many countries.
Hmm.
Are you finding, you talk in your country, vulnerability, being modest, modeling, a leader who model like, well, we talk about modeling.
Hmm.
Are you seeing that across the countries that you're dealing? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly, culture influences our view of leadership, and the way we lead. Definitely, and it's going to be different depending on region, on country. Even in Europe, it's different. It's different in Western Europe than it is in Eastern Europe, and often it may be different in neighboring countries. So. I think understanding where the culture is and where they're coming from, understanding a little bit of the culture and the history, will help you a long way as a leader, because you cannot bring your own view of leadership or even standards and expect that it's going to be embraced immediately. It takes time, and often it's just something that you got to be sensitive with. I wish there is a recipe or an easy principle to apply, but other than listening, understanding where people are coming from, their view, perceptions, and even it can go multiple ways, where a woman might come in a leadership position based on past experiences, trying to prove a lot, or it might not be the case, or it might be the case. So understanding that reality, I think, for a leader is very important.
yeah. Thank you for answering that. I wanted to ask you if more about challenges and strategies. I can see my lips aren't moving yet this morning. I'm clearly still waking up. Um,
No worries.
I'm not sure if you can talk about unique challenges you face as a leader in your own country or culture, and if you could share an example of
Mm.
how you addressed it.
So one of them I already touched on is this top-down type of leadership, hierarchical. And probably a challenge that comes with that is lack of leadership models. I'll give you an example. If I ask you, Lissa, what's somebody, a leader that you admire? And as I asked this, maybe in Western countries, people often tell me about their parents. They tell me about a teacher. They tell me about somebody they know. With obviously some exceptions, but often in our culture, people talk about a leader, but not somebody that they know. It's somebody that they've read about, they heard about, maybe a movie character, but not necessarily often people that you've lived with. Of course, you have some people where they will see the leader I admire the most is my father or my mother, but often is somebody that they don't know. So clearly, that helps you understand there's a lack of models, a leadership void that has been created by the impact of communism and the effects of that
Mhm.
system. Um, so how I or we are trying to overcome some of that challenge is expose Romanian leaders, emerging leaders, and actual leaders to good models of leaders, good leadership. So one thing that I've done was, bring people from US, Canada, Europe, Western Europe. And I'm not saying that, things are perfect in these countries, but I think clearly you can see more leadership models, resources, principles, and proven success, tested tools and resources. So exposing Romanian leaders and European leaders to good leadership models through bringing speakers, or even I've created a mentoring program where we basically paired leaders from US with Romanian leaders. And it was a 9 months leadership program. And some of those relationships that have turned into friendships that have lasted for years. Some of these guys have business relationships; they work together. So it's obviously not at a huge scale, but it's one way to sort that problem. I think another thing that's happening in our country, um, we're learning a lot, we're reading a lot. There's a lot of appetite for leadership in Eastern Europe. So people are really learning, going to conferences, to seminars, trying to learn as much as possible how to become a better leader and be more effective in how they lead their teams and their businesses.
Mhm. No different. I mean, in Canada, this the appetite for
Hmm.
learning. The
Hmm.
interesting comment about the leadership, and that for us, it's well, I think it's natural to look to our parents. We want to model our
Hmm.
parents,
Hmm.
but again, just that it's natural. But you're saying it's they don't, they didn't look at that. I believe that's
Yeah,
what you're
and
saying.
it's not the idea of, I've had amazing parents, but not necessarily they didn't necessarily model good leadership principles, because they have not had models of their own. Um, and I had to look outside. Even it's true for myself. Most of my mentors across the years, so I'm talking 30 years, have been mentors from outside Romania.
Yeah. And do you see a shift? You're saying this is 30 years. Are you seeing a shift in those 20-year-olds coming up, the new leadership.
I think so. I think so. Obviously, there is an openness now. There are new businesses emerging. There is a different style because ultimately the market will force you to offer some good leadership. Otherwise, you're out. So I think democracy, in a sense, comes with a pressure on good leadership. So I think we have seen and we are seeing good leadership emerge in Romania. Can't say there's an abundance. I wish, but it's coming. I think with younger generations, we're going to see more and more and more.
Good. All right. Our next question talks a little bit about cultural sensitivity and global leadership.
Hmm.
And how do you approach leading a team or organization with members from diverse cultural backgrounds?
Mm. Good question. I wish, again, somebody handed me a recipe. But people don't come with instructions, with how to work with. There's no manual on how to work with people. Um, I think cultural diversity is very significant. I've had the opportunity to work in several multicultural teams and contexts, both in business, but also in some non-for-profit organizations. I would say again, looking at who you have in the team and what their background. There's some great resources. There's um, several books that talk about culture and culture differences, and understanding how culture influences our decision making, how culture influences our communication style. There's a book called, and maybe you will find this helpful, the listeners and viewers. It's called Culture Map. Really, I forget the author, but he's talking about how it's going to be different how Romanians communicate and then how people in US and Canada communicate. Usually, leadership is very hierarchical in some cultures and very relational in other cultures. How we approach conflict is going to be very different. So I think being aware and using the research, the studies, and of course is going to be different with every person. So again, there is the danger of putting people into boxes because you're from a certain culture, you should have that profile. I think we got to be careful at that too. But something that's very important for me is I try to focus on what do we have in common more than where are we different. I think being aware of differences is important, but focusing on what is it that we have in common. Human nature is a huge common ground when it comes to leadership. So creating that space where people can really be honest and ultimately, yeah, you're coming with a certain mindset into how you're going to communicate, but if as a leader you're creating that space where people understand where you're coming from, what your motivation is, and that you're for them, ultimately will get people to open up. um, but you might have to work harder with some and less with others. um, the most important thing is understanding that the world does not look like how you see it. The world is not how we see it. The world might be very different than how we see it because we see it through our own glasses of culture and mindset and views, and understanding that others are looking at the same thing but we come from completely different um perspective, wearing different glasses, I think that's very important. And in a sense, that creates that humbleness, that modesty of saying maybe the way I'm seeing it is not definitely how everybody else is seeing it. So at least listen, understand, ask a question, and see and really listen to see what you're hearing from others, and that might be very insightful.
Yeah. The book you talked about, I'm just going to repeat it, Culture Map.
Culture map, yes.
Culture Map. And I'm sure if we Google that, we'll find that, the Google. When you talk about understanding and trust, I think of the many countries you're working in, and your involvement in Leader Impact. I mean, global strategies. You are being translated in many countries.
Hmm.
Has there ever been a disconnect, a misunderstanding in a translation, and causes a problem?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
um y- the whole idea is, I think there was a time when we led with methods, with recipe. Basically, I have a model, replicate this model and apply it everywhere else. um in a sense, McDonald's is a champion of that. They have started a model, they packaged it, and they have multiplied it across the world. But it's interesting what McDonald's is doing is they always have this cultural um, sensitivity where every culture can bring their own products. Yes, you're going to have the Big Mac, you're going to have the products that McDonald's has everywhere, and they're going to be consistent. But they also have, you go to Italy and you're going to have your espresso the way Italians have it. You can have, you go somewhere else and have something else. Even Romanians have their famous mici. Those are some sausages that Romanians are very proud of, and from time to time, you're gonna find them in a McDonald's. All of that to say, um, where I think it's important that we replicate some of the things that can be replicated and multiply, but we also need to lead with principles. And I think the more I apply that what's the principle behind what we're trying to do? Principles are go beyond culture and beyond time, and learning how to bring the principle so that the local leaders can understand it and contextualize it is so important. And I think, talk about translation, me being sensitive to what the culture is, what's happening in the culture, and not assuming. For example, I was in Turkey a year ago, and I kept using this word that made sense in my culture, in my context, but it meant totally different to them, and people were just frowning, and I could see there was tense in the room, and people were getting frustrated with me. And when I stopped and say, "Okay, what's happening?
Mhm.
And what's this about?" And people explained what the cultural difference was, and we had to define a different term that applied and translated. But I had to be sensitive and aware and obviously I had to learn something that I had no idea about.
Yeah. So, were you in person in Turkey, or was it a Zoom? Okay.
No, it
Just
was in person. It was
yeah,
in-person training. Mhm.
good. All right. Well, we're going to move on to personal development and learning. I'm just wondering if you have any advice you would give to aspiring leaders, particularly those from different cultural backgrounds.
Mm. So, I will speak about some of the things that I would say were key in my development, and hopefully they apply. But I think having a mentor is so important. Have somebody that is more experienced, even older. I think it helps because they bring a different experience from a later in life perspective that you cannot have as a young leader. You do not, you're not there, but anticipating, seeing what's going to happen. I have a mentor right now from the US. I meet with him every 2 weeks. I leave so inspired after every conversation. He's at a different stage in life, and I'm able to anticipate, in a sense, where I will be 10 years from now because of learning about where he is and what's going on in his life. So have a mentor, read a lot, learn a lot. Maybe reading is not your thing, but so many other options, podcasts, clearly Leader Impact Podcast is a great source, but learn from other leaders. Learn from other leadership experiences. Don't listen just to the people that you like and are saying the things that you agree with, but really dive in deep. And this is very profound. I find it very hard to listen to people that I don't agree with, um, but it's so healthy, because it really helps us understand why we believe what we believe, and even kind of try to put a little bit, not doubt it, but challenge our beliefs. I think that's important, because we often think we're right, and we might find out is not true. And hopefully, we're learning in advance, not when it hurts.
Yeah. I'm just going to jump in here when I think of artificial intelligence and
Mm,
our phones are and not that they're listening to us, it's just they're listening and they give you what you want. So here you are, you have an ideal, you're talking
mhm.
about it, and it just gives you more, and you think, I am right. and you're
Yes,
and
yes,
you need to read things you don't like. And so I think I need to start saying to my phone the opposite of what I'm saying, so I can get some other, because you get fed. That's what
yeah,
it
yeah,
wants, to give you more of
exactly,
what you want. Well, we need to challenge our thinking.
exactly. And one more thing, Lisa, that I think is very important, is that cluelessness syndrome of leaders. Basically, we're all clueless about something. We all have weaknesses, and you know how it is when you're driving a car. There's that dead angle where you cannot see what you cannot see. Basically, it's the things in our life as a leader where we don't know what we don't know, but everybody else knows. And the higher you are in leadership, the less you're gonna hear it, because people are afraid to tell you, or they're not afraid, but maybe it's uncomfortable. It's so being intentional about hearing what you don't know, and hearing things about yourself that maybe you don't like to hear. So invite feedback. Mentors can tell you, have 360s where you invite people to speak into your life, but also whenever somebody tells you something that will really kind of make you jump and feel like, oh, I don't like this, I should defend, I should justify, he's not right.
Mhm.
Ask at least one or two questions. I'm curious, what makes you say that? Tell me more about that. And then you can justify it, and you can maybe defend it if you feel like you still need to. But really listen well, to find what's in your blind spot.
Right. So would you say, I mean, I know that Leader Impact, we as leaders come together. So we have each other, we surround ourselves with other leaders, and we can talk about these things. Would you find that in Romania, are leaders doing that? Are they surrounding themselves? Because leadership is lonely. You get to the top, you got no one to talk to.
Yeah.
And, so that's one of the great things with Leader Impact for me, is surrounding myself with other leaders, and I can talk to someone. Are you, is that prominent?
Yeah, we're big in Leader Impact about that. All of our small groups are actually not about the small group, and not about the book that we may, or the topic that we may be discussing or studying. Is basically create that safe environment for leaders to learn from each other, but also for leaders to see those blind spots, to see and learn from others, That's where you find mentors in a sense. You learn from other people's mistakes without doing the same mistakes, and you can anticipate what not to do, but also you learn from best practices. We're not going to be great at everything. We're going to be great at some things, and we have a chance and opportunity to invest in leaders that will definitely put to work what you have to offer, but also it will be a huge opportunity for you to learn. So that's the environment we're trying to create in Leader Impact, and not just professionally, but also personally and spiritually, because those are important areas in our lives, and they really influence how we lead ultimately, and they influence our business success.
Yeah. There are many countries that are very vibrant, very outgoing about their faith.
Mhm.
Um, some are not. Where does Romania fit in that? Are you dancing on the streets with your faith, or are you very private, or where?
I would say culturally, Eastern Europeans, Romanians are more private about faith. It's kind of awkward to talk about faith. You talk about faith with maybe family and close friends in a special context. I think it shouldn't be that way. I think we should be more open about having conversations around faith, but it's where we are. So it definitely takes a little bit of warming up for a Romanian to talk about faith and God and stuff like that. But it's important. We definitely want to create that type of environment in Leader Impact.
Good. How do you or how does your country measure the success of a leader?
Hmm. I'm not sure if there is a. I'll share my personal opinion. Obviously, results. Are very important. A leader that can deliver results is going to be an appreciated leader, but it's not just about results. It's about the environment that you're creating as a leader. So I think a leader that is able to focus on the objective and gets things done and achieves great results, but not at the expense of people. um, so creating an environment where people love their job, their role, they feel they're being empowered. Um, I think often I hear Romanian leaders, and not just Romania, but I think it's true across the world. Um, it's always results and people, and results are ultimately achieved by people. And being able to empower, to internally motivate, and a leader that knows how to increase the engagement of his team will lead to better results. So success of leaders is um, people who are able to do both.
Mhm. It sounds good to me. What do you hope your legacy as a leader is when you leave this world?
Mm. I do hope that people will say I'm a better leader because I got to work with Elvis. I got to rub shoulders with him. I do hope that people will say Elvis has been a person who not just talk the talk, but walk the talk. Um, that I modeled good leadership. Um, I hope that I will be humble enough to be, to admit when I made mistakes, and people will admire. And I think I hope that people will say, "Yeah, I know what Elvis's weaknesses were, but he was honest and also diligent. He worked hard at overcoming some of his shortcomings." So I hope that's gonna be my legacy, and I hope my kids will say I will have been their best friends, and my wife will say the same thing, that I will have not sacrificed my family and friends for the sake of work.
Right. Yeah.
That's the kind of legacy I'm hoping. But a lot still that I need to do to be good at that.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's an
I agree.
everyday. Yeah. I'd like to think that some days I'm really good at it and some days I'm not so, but average out, I'm good.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work and diligence. It doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure.
I think we need to just all remember to grant ourselves some grace when we
Yeah,
are not, when something happens, when we took 2 steps back and, it's okay. Or 1 step back, 2 forward. It just grant yourself some grace.
I agree.
Elvis, I want to thank you for just taking this time. We appreciate it as leaders around the world. I want to hear more about the leadership. And I just love because Leader Impact is around the world. We're always zooming in on meetings together, and how lucky we are to have this
Indeed,
to speak. Here we are speaking live.
indeed,
So I
indeed.
just want to thank you. Now, if anyone wants to connect with you, find out, I love that book, Culture Map. How can they engage with you? How do they find you?
First of all, Lisa, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Yeah, would love to connect over LinkedIn, and yeah, I love meeting leaders all over the globe, and Leader Impact is a huge community and network of leaders. So hopefully, we get to connect and share leadership life lessons and
Right.
best practices.
Awesome. Thank you, Elvis. It's been a great half
Thank
hour.
you.
All right. Well, if you're part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. And if you're not yet part of Leader Impact and would like to find out more and grow your leadership, find our podcast page on our website at leaderimpact.ca and check out our free leadership assessment. You will also find on our webpage Chapter 1 of Braden Douglas's book, Becoming a Leader of Impact. You can also check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a comment, give us a rating or review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us, and remember, impact starts with you.